My guest today is someone whose voice matters not just on economy and finance, but also resonates with the electorate on the ground. Fresh visit from his constituency and a pulse check of what the voters are making of this demonetization. In conversation here with the very, very erudite Mr. Jayant Sinha. Thanks very much for speaking to us, sir.
Good afternoon, Supriya.
You just back from your constituency. I'm sure you have a better pulse of what the people are feeling about this. I am not going to ask you to point me out to the municipal election victory both in Gujarat and Maharashtra. But I'm a skeptic. I'm supposed to be a skeptic by my profession. And so I must ask you, while people are seemingly giving you a big thumbs up, and I'm sure, we've had this conversation about how people in your constituency seem to lap it up, and I'll talk a little more about it. But is there fear? And, I'm just voicing concern of some people that the perceived political gains out of this may actually not compensate for the economic losses that may come about from demonetization.
Well, let's talk about where we are in terms of the response from the people. You've already alluded, Supriya, to the election victories, which have been quite, astonishing in terms of the depth and the breadth of the election victories. But when you talk to people and you try and get a pulse of their thinking about this issue, what you find is that this has been incredibly popular with everyone. And it really boils down to 2 or 3 things which I'll explain. One is that, of course, people have had some discomfort or some challenges in terms of getting their notes changed, etc. But for most people in rural areas who are not that prosperous, they don't really deal very much with 500 and 1,000 rupee notes. Second factor is that people are realizing that all the people who've made life difficult for them, the bureaucrats who took bribes, or the businessmen who
are being brought to task.
That's right. And so that notion that, the people who have really been oppressing them and have making life difficult for them, they are now having to deal with all of this. That is also making it very, very popular. And then the third aspect I will say is that there is tremendous conviction among people, and as the Honorable Prime Minister has always been extremely popular, and with this action he's shown himself to really be a bold, decisive leader that is striking at the root of what is really hurting people a lot, and that is black money and corruption. So when you put all this together, the popular reaction on the ground, whether it's from the election results or speaking to people, is very, very positive.
I'm sure it's positive, and I'm sure that's the feedback that you're getting. But you've actually alluded to 2 points: the stock and the circulation of black money. I'll come to that in just a bit. But the point that you made, that you're getting a big thumbs up because people believe that all these people who had hoarded black money or who were making life difficult are being brought to task. That also tells you a thing or two about vicarious pleasure out of this whole activity. But sir, you're somebody who understands the implications of this move, and you will not deny, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit in detail about the consumption being hit, about growth being hit on account of this. It's all right for these people to today say that it's a very good move, but the demonetization's impact will come and bite them in a while from now, when there will be economic downturn on account of this. Do you not believe that the reaction that you're seeing on the ground is very immediate?
In fact, one would argue it the other way, Supriya, which is that the longer...
they haven't still been pinched, if I may.
Well, I actually think, you're getting it the wrong way around. Because the reality is that the long-term economic benefits are vast. I'll explain that in a second. And it's really the short-term inconvenience and difficulties that people are facing that is more of a challenge. Because really, as I've said often before, many times, this is not about demonetization. Because demonetization happened November 8th, midnight. Demonetization happened.
That's right.
The short-term economic challenge that we've had to deal with is remonetization, which is making sure that there's enough currency in circulation so that people can get back to their normal lives. That, as the Honorable Prime Minister said, is something that will last till December 30th. It'll take us that much time to remonetize the economy in terms of cash and get to the point where things are back to normalcy in terms of cash in circulation. Thereafter, from January 1 onwards, the economic benefits are going to be vast. They're going to be tremendous. Because, and let me just run them down very quickly. First and foremost, we know and we expect that a certain amount of money will not come back. So if you took 15 lakh crores out of circulation,
there'll be some extinguished currency.
There'll be some extinguished. Now that money can be used in a very, very productive way. Pradhan Mantri ji has already said Garib Kalyan Yojana, so we will deploy them for the benefit of the poor. So that's one very big economic benefit. Second big economic benefit is that deposits, CASA deposits in our banks will go up dramatically, which will really help us heal and fix our financial system. Number three, I think, is that people's behavior will change in terms of tax compliance. So we expect that the tax to GDP ratio will improve, people will pay more taxes and so on, which will again be very beneficial and will also enable us in some ways to perhaps make more adjustments to our taxes and our tax rates. And of course, interest rates and all of those things will come down as the CASA and the healing in the financial system happens. So we will be establishing a new normal, as the Honorable Finance Minister has said. And this new normal for the Indian economy will position it really, really well for continued and very sustainable growth going forward. So the longer term economic impact of this is actually very positive.
But realistically,
it's the short term issues that are challenging.
Point. Realistically speaking, are we going to see a new normal come the 1st of January? Because some people have suggested that the remonetization itself will actually take 7 odd months.
I think the remonetization should be largely complete by the end of this year, December 31st. From January 1, I think the new normal will happen. Let me tell you that one of the very, very big sort of impact of this whole process has been that the mindset and behavior of Indians has changed. People suddenly recognize that if they have not been paying their taxes, if they have not been following the laws, that ultimately they will be brought to justice, as we've done.
At least there's a sense of fear. I can't evade.
I don't want to call it fear. Yeah. I see it as people recognizing that we are not living in a soft state anymore. That we are not living in a soft state. That this is a firm and determined state. That if you're not pursuing the laws of the land, and if you're not really paying what is due to get back to society, that there will be consequences. That change in psychology will, I think, help us establish a new normal in which tax compliance will go up, tax to GDP will go up, and people will be investing their money in much more productive ways than by putting it all into gold and real estate, which is not as productive.
I'll come to that in just a bit. You alluded to banks and their deposits. Is there too much exuberance around those deposits? Because right now you can deposit any amount, but there is a cap on withdrawals. Are we making that figure out to be a little too much? Are we running that risk really?
Well, I think a lot of the whole...
Because once you take those caps away, people will be willing to withdraw a lot more.
As I was saying, a lot of the economic analysis really hinges on what I call X and Y. Let me explain what X and Y are. X is basically the amount of money that is not coming back, is being extinguished, right? So if we took 15 trillion rupees out of circulation, then how much is going to come back? Suppose, for the sake of argument,
10 comes back.
Let's say 10, 12 come back. So then if 12 comes back, then there are 3 trillion rupees, 3 lakh crores that have been extinguished. That's X. That's a very important number, and we have to understand how big that is. There are many, many guesses on what that number is. We can't hazard a guess at this point. The other number that is very interesting and we need to think about is Y. And what is Y? Y is the number that actually stays with the bank. So suppose you take the 12 lakh crores and you deposit that into the banks. Then you take out a whole bunch of money, but you leave behind 2 or 3 lakh crores as extra deposits, CASA deposits with the banking system. That has again very tremendous multiplier effects in the economy, helps us improve our financial system and so on. So what that X is in terms of the money that's extinguished, and Y, which is the amount of money, CASA money, that comes into our banks, those are things that are going to really tell us how quickly the economy is going to accelerate going forward.
You alluded to the RBI and you alluded to rate cut twice so far. What sort of an elbow room do you think the RBI now has to cut interest rates, considering that the extinguished currency is also going to reduce the RBI's liability?
I think that's really...
And some people have said a radical rate cut is warranted. What is
that?
Radical?
Really is the prerogative of the RBI to figure out. But I think all of us who are observing what's happening in the economy do recognize that this is significant deflationary consequences, right? And what we would expect, CPI, which really is what RBI is looking at closely, that CPI will in fact respond to those deflationary forces, and that should open up room for RBI. Now, how much room, when it can happen, how it can happen, those are the kinds of things that RBI, as a very fact-based professional organization, has to work through. But I think all of us recognize that there will be deflationary forces that have been put into motion.
Is that a good thing for a developing economy to have deflationary forces in motion?
Yes,
to
I mean,
clamp down on demand?
I think the best thing for emerging market economy is in fact to have low inflation and high growth. We can't have high inflation and high growth because that brings in a lot of pernicious and unfortunate consequences as well. Because what we're really doing is we're saying that the supply side bottlenecks have diminished, growth is there, the productive capacity of the economy has gone up, and that's what happens. So I think.
But does a muted or a dented demand augur well for an emerging economy? I mean, who's going to produce if there's going to be less demand given the deflationary forces?
No, the deflationary, when I said the deflationary forces, I meant that in terms of price levels. I didn't mean it in terms of demand destruction. So please don't be...
Is this move not going to impact demand?
No, I don't think so. In fact, the way I have looked at it is to say that really that we will have three categories that we have to think about. There's the fast-moving consumer goods, right?
Which has already taken a hit.
Which is, of course, it's going to take a hit. All of these are going to take a hit, as I'll explain in a second. The question is how quickly do they rebound, right? So when it comes to soap and toothpaste and, chips and, and clothes and so on, generally the more fast-moving consumer goods, I think all that's going to happen is that we are going to defer consumption, maybe by a month or two. Okay. But as soon as all the cash comes back in circulation, which we know by December 31st is going to happen, that deferred consumption is going to roar back to life and consumption is going to go back to normal, right? Number one.
So you expect consumption to go back to normal in a month or two?
By December, January, I think consumption is going to be back to normal levels. Then there's a second category of goods, which are the consumer durables, right? Consumer durables are obviously washing machines and cars and motorcycles and so on. There'll be a bit of a reset, I think, and people will start to think through exactly how much they want to spend. How that's going to play out, I'm not sure, but I think once people readjust, is there any black money going into that kind of purchasing? I don't think so.
It's perhaps cash and not black money.
Yes, and so once the cash is back, it'll happen. Plus, don't forget that if interest rates come down, EMIs come down, consumer durables will pick up. Okay. So how we weigh those two off, I think at the end of the day, should be a net positive for consumer durables. Then we come to certain industries like luxury goods, real estate, jewelry, that might be structurally impacted because they have been places where you've put, black money and so on. So I think there we may see a bit of a structural change. But again, in real estate, with interest rates coming down and so on, and all the efforts that we have to boost the housing sector, we may well see a big pickup there as well. So these are the three categories that I see, and to my mind, consumption, the fast-moving consumption is going to move very quickly back to normalcy. The other two, it's a little hard to speculate as to what might happen.
At least I'm glad that you're being candid that right now it's hard to speculate how soon will it take for those other two to pick up on account of this consumption being hit or being dented temporarily or otherwise. What sort of an impact do you think this is going to have on GDP growth? You've got brokerage houses putting an estimate from 0.3 to 3%. You've had former Prime Minister say in the House 2%. Where do you see GDP growth settle down? And there's a reason why I'm asking you that question. For India to grow at 7.6%, which is of course your government's target for this fiscal, you've got to now grow at 8.2 for the second half. Is that going to be possible?
Well, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. It's too early to tell. I mean, of course, I track the aviation sector very closely, and I can tell you how all of this has played out as far as aviation is concerned. Once demonetization happened, there was a 10 to 15% decline in ticketing. Of course, some people bought in cash as well, as you know, of course. So there was,
to suffer now.
There was a bit of an offset there, but still there was a 10%, 15% decline there. Then our airline swung into action. There were flash sales. People once again started to put out very attractive offers. And now airline ticket sales are back to normal. They're at normal levels. So you can see how fast the recovery has been. Within 2 or 3 weeks, we're back to normal again as far as tickets are concerned. Where there is still a little bit of a question mark right now is on certain packages, leisure packages. People would say, okay, I'm going to buy package to go to Thailand or something to go to Europe. Those are still a little bit hit. But in terms of domestic ticketing, that's back to normal levels already. I'm
not just letting you know where your aviation minister's hat, because that's not what that's not all that you're good at. But I am going to go back to growth. 8.2% for the second half is going to be difficult. Is it now time to make our peace with the fact that we are not going to grow at anywhere close to 7.6%?
That's hard to predict, Supriya, because the reality is that we will in fact see a rebound in consumption once cash is back in the economy, number one. And number two, whether it's interest rates, whether it's the policies in the budget and so on, I think all of that will also boost the economy. And people are feeling good. I mean, this is the point that I want to once again re-emphasize, right? It's not as if people are standing in the lines and are unhappy. People are standing in lines and they're really happy. They feel that they have a future they are excited about. They have a sense that the economy and the country that we are building is a country that they have great hopes for. They are confident about the future. They like the political leadership. They like the policies. This is an unleashing of the animal spirit, Supriya, that happens when people have faith in the government and the future, and that's clearly coming through. So, while we can speak doom and gloom, I don't think that's the ground reality. The ground reality is hopeful and enthusiastic and positive.
And it's perhaps giving you a thumbs up with the election.
It is absolutely giving us a thumbs up.
We'll just talk about the word faith in a moment from now, but I want to just get done with the RBI. And as a technical body that's responsible for adequate supply of currency in the market, has the RBI been found wanting on this one? And is the RBI now caught in a conundrum where it was speaking too much and now speaking too little or actually nothing at all? Doesn't there need to be a balance? The RBI just seems to be missing from this entire discourse.
I think the RBI has spoken. Of course, you saw, the responses that the governor has put out.
One PTI interview.
The governor has put out, and of course, they have their very important policy review coming up. So let's wait for that policy review.
But don't you think the RBI needs to be a little more vocal with their response, with what they're doing? They are the monetary authority after all. Well,
as a government, I think we are communicating and we are really making sure that everybody has the facts and they have the logic behind this very transformational move, and the response back from the people and from everyone is very, very positive.
So the government is more than making up for RBI's silence. You use the word faith, and I'm presuming that lawmakers like yourselves are happy with the faith that you've seen at least in elections in Gujarat and Mumbai. But I want to go back to the whole planning bit. It's, I don't think your worst critics will doubt you the intention or the objective you've set out to achieve. And I think you've got a big thumbs up there, even from your sharpest critics, because even if the opposition is opposing, they're really criticizing you and attacking you on implementation and on execution. But too many flip-flops, too many back and forth, 186 changes since this policy was really announced. You've had the Prime Minister say you can exchange notes till 30th December. That has now been stopped. You've said hike in limit of withdrawals, but only of new tendered currency, legally tendered currency. If you were back there in the Finance Ministry, if you were back there in North Block, would you not admit that it has been wanting on implementation? This could have been perhaps a lot better planned.
I think the government has done a wonderful job, Supriya. Remember, this is an economic action that's been taken, a transformational move that's underway, that's never ever been attempted before in human history. Nowhere has there been an economy of this size and this scale where there has been a demonetization that has been as well executed and done in such secrecy and in such a swift and decisive manner. This is extraordinary. And of course, once that happens, you're going to have a dynamic and evolving situation which you have to respond to. Remember, we Indians are very good at jugaad, right? And once this was done, and we, of course, from a humanitarian and practical point of view, had to make sure that certain channels were open and people could go and buy medicines, people could go to hospitals, people could fill up their petrol tanks and so on. So we had to keep certain channels open. And when we kept those open, we found that people, of course, as they tend to do, try and take advantage of that. And so we've had to evolve a variety of different measures so that this can move forward in a smooth and seamless way. And in fact, it is, Supriya. That is the remarkable thing. I have explained before also that we have 600,000 cash distribution points across this country. And with 6 lakh distribution points like that, we have to get the cash there, we have to recalibrate the ATMs, we have to equip the bank tellers with the money and all the procedures. And we have to ensure that this money, as it goes out in a balanced way. We can't have a situation that Tezpur has all the money and Dimapur doesn't have any money.
Yes.
So that balancing out across all these distribution points, making sure that everything is done in a secure way, managing all of the political reaction and the public reaction around it, I think people deserve tremendous applause and praise for what they've done.
Cashless seems to be this new Uber word, if I may. But what is the great virtue about cashless? Shouldn't an economy be accountable? And are we in the process somewhere between the opposition on one hand and the treasury benches on the other, trying to make cash out to be this demon? Black money is a demon, yes, but all that's cash is not black.
Supriya, everybody has been saying that we have to move.
When we talk about cashless, America is not a cashless society.
No, but I don't.
Japan is.
I don't think anybody is saying that.
Yes.
Supriya. What we are saying, of course, is that we have to move to a less cash economy. If you look at a cash to GDP ratio, it's several points higher than other countries. We are at maybe 11 or 12%. Other countries are at 7 or 8%. Even though it's hard to find a comparable, but we all believe that there should be less cash in the economy. Cash is expensive. Cash has high frictional costs. It costs money to move cash around. The cash that's not in the financial system cannot be used to lend out and to provide credit and so on. So less cash is better. And to the extent that we can move towards people towards digital, that's really, really good, because that obviously means that their money works harder. They get interest on all of that. The credit that can be delivered through that savings can happen as well, and it's much more efficient just in terms of transacting, right? And finally, what I will say is that cash can also be used for counterfeiting, for drugs, for terrorism, and so on. So if we move to a less cash economy, a more digital economy, as advanced 21st century economies generally are, then it's really helping us build a new economy and a new normal that will enable us to sustain 8-9% growth for the future, which we need to do.
So because this is all about the common man, and the common man would want to know what is the final outcome on him going to be, both ministers in the government and people in the opposition, like Mr. Chidambaram, who I interviewed a couple of days back, have said that this should pave the way for lower tax rates. In fact, Mr. Chidambaram went on to say that 1997, 10, 20, 30 have perhaps outlived their relevance. It's time to do so. He's really put the onus on your government. Do you believe there is room for lower tax rates just yet? And can budget 2017 pave the way for it?
That is a question the Honorable Finance Minister and the Honorable Prime Minister will answer, obviously, because they have to take a lot of factors into consideration. What I will say is, as I said, if we are able to extinguish a fair amount of this currency, the X that I said, and we get a sufficient amount of CASA money into our banks, which is the Y, as I was saying, that is going to be really, really wonderful for the economy. So we really should work towards that, and that will give us a lot of fiscal room. How that fiscal room should be used, obviously, as I said, Honorable FM and Honorable PM will decide. But at the same time, I will say that, as we move towards a digital economy, along with the fiscal space and the monetary space that we create, this is really what the new normal is about. It's about having monetary space, it's having fiscal space, and having an economy where the velocity of money is much higher because it's all digital, where the digital trails are there so that if anybody is evading taxes, we can find them. There's no place to hide in that sense. That's a much better, much more robust, much better economy for all of us. And therefore, I think this is the part that the opposition doesn't seem to understand. But the people of India have understood really well, which is, yes, there is inconvenience. Yes, there are challenges. However, this short-term pain is way less than all the long-term benefits we're going to get. That equation, that trade-off is very clear in the minds of the people of India based on my interactions with lots of people, speeches, talking to people and so on. And they all are fully behind it because they see the long-term benefits.
So two last questions before I let you go, and I can't not ask you on markets because you understand the language and their psyche, and equity markets and the rupee have been fairly volatile. Of course, there are a lot of global factors on that. Mr. Trump has played his role as well, but so are the domestic factors. What is it that the markets are fearing? What is it that the currency seems to be worried about? Is there certain erosion of faith in what the government has said? Is there fear that the taxman can come calling? I mean, what is the fear really?
I don't think there's fear as such.
Suspicion?
Well, all of us who've been in the markets for decades, know these things come and go, right? And there are periods of high volatility and high uncertainty, and then things settle down for a little bit, and then we have another bout of uncertainty. Right now, we are in an uncertain, tenuous phase in the markets because of many factors that are at work, right? People want to understand how is this remonetization going to play out, and what are the structural impacts, right? People know that there's a short-term blip, but what are the longer-term structural impacts? frankly, nobody at this stage, because this economic experiment has never been run before. So nobody knows, and that creates uncertainty. So that's one set of issues. You should see what's happening in the presidential transition in the US right now. It's unprecedented, you know. We have a very unconventional president. We have a real resetting of the American establishment going on right now, which has extraordinary impacts on things like interest rates for the Fed, fiscal policies as far as the US is concerned, their tax rates, etc. That creates a tremendous amount of uncertainty in the markets as well. So that's a second source. A third source is what's going to happen to Europe. There's a referendum coming up in Italy. And people don't know what that's going to do. How is Brexit going to work itself out? Nobody knows. Number three, the kind of low growth environment that we're seeing in Europe, there seems to be no end in sight. What's going to happen there? So you look at Europe, there's that set of issues. There are plenty of
pressure, pain points that
and then finally we have the Middle East, which remains in turmoil, right? And who knows, you wake up tomorrow morning and something really dramatic has happened in the Middle East. So when you add all these pieces together, you realize that we're going through a phase of significant uncertainty in the markets. And the volatility pickups that you're seeing, the VIX going up, all of those factors are really in response to all these different things. Now, when you speak to investors, as I often do, you know, there's of course folks who are traders. They love the volatility. They like the fact
money to be punched there.
They like the fact the markets are going up and down. When you talk to longer term investors, they are very positive about what's happened in India because they see this new normal. They see this new economy. They see an economy that's going to play by the rules. Tax to GDP will go up. Cash to GDP will come down. NPA situation will hopefully get much better because of our CASA situation improving. So they really like what they see. And so they say, as you think forward, you know, 2, 3, 4 quarters, we think India is going to do even better. And so longer term investors are pretty excited about what they're seeing.
Mr. Sinha, we started off with the common man and we really started at the bottom of the pyramid. We spoke about that Nai in Hazaribagh that you interacted with, but there is a middle class population out there who perhaps was dealing with cash, which wasn't all unaccounted for, which wasn't all black. And in the minds of those people, and this is really how we end this, in the minds of those people, there is a suspicion, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to sit there and say that the hotbed of corruption is really the last mile tax authorities. Sometimes they can be very grueling. There is the suspicion that has the state been unleashed at my doorstep? How are you going to assuage those fears?
No, obviously we dealt with that at length when I was in the Ministry of Finance, and Honorable Finance Minister has said over and over again, and I think the Revenue Secretary has also been very clear as far as this is concerned, is that we want our tax administration to be fair, to be honest, and to try and ensure that everything is done as transparently as possible. And we're absolutely moving in that direction. As you remember, refunds are being paid electronically very quickly. Most of the interactions with taxpayers have been done via email and electronically as well. You know, if we have found, you know, clear cases where people have been abusing their powers, those have been dealt with very severely. So all the things that can be done with respect to ensuring that our tax administration is fair and honest and transparent, those actions are being taken. And I'm sure, and I'm not just sure, I'm absolutely convinced that, you know, whatever is required to enable that to happen, those steps will be taken.
I'm glad people like you are keeping their ears and eyes very, very close to the ground and looking at an evolving situation. But thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you, Supriya.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.